I used to dismiss miracle stories as just emotional fluff. If you can't measure it, it's not real. But by the time I was 25 and defending my Ph.D. in astrophysics, where I invented a new equation in galactic dynamics, my perspective shifted. I realized that true scientific integrity demands looking at all of the data, even the data that defies the mechanism. While my goal with my videos is to help logical thinkers build unshakable conviction by revealing the unity between modern science and ancient wisdom, the role of telling over miracle stories cannot be understated. And today, I'm going to share the single most important data point of my life. It didn't happen in a lab. It happened in a hospital room. Now, before I tell you about the miracle that happened to my son, who was 2 years old at the time, we need to fix a broken definition. Skeptics love the God of the gaps argument. They say, oh, you just call it a miracle because science hasn't explained it yet. They think that as science advances, God retreats. But we're going to flip that. We're going to look at the science of the gaps. Science explains the mechanism, the biology, the chemistry, the how, but it cannot explain the agency, the who and the why. Discovering how a car engine works does not disprove the existence of Henry Ford. It was March 2024, the Sunday before Purim, which would happen Saturday night, and my son Mendel, who at the time had just turned 2 years old, about 5 in the afternoon, just let out a huge projectile. It was everywhere. And suddenly he became lethargic. And not only that, he started to have diarrhea as well. So we thought, okay, it's a rotavirus. Now, leading up to this, he had been hospitalized 13 times before in less than 2 years for all different reasons. Respiratory, low blood sugar, even for a burn that happened by accident. Passing out, his face and his lips would go blue and white, and he would pass out for over a minute at a time and would be completely lifeless. In fact, his teachers were so freaked out, he was not allowed to go to camp that summer. We took him for all different types of tests. Nothing came back, and we couldn't figure it out. This was the first instance where he seemed to have a different type of illness that wasn't like the previous ones. And this would end up becoming his 14th time being admitted to the hospital. We decided to let it be, to stay home with him for a day, but he didn't really get better. He wasn't really walking anymore. He wasn't even crawling. He was just lethargic. By Tuesday morning, the motherly instincts kicked in with my wife, and she took him to the hospital. But before we continue, remember to sign up for my free newsletter so you don't miss the exclusive preview of my upcoming Torah and Science book. The link is in the pinned comment under the subscribe button. And then Mendel came back 8 hours later. At the hospital, they saw his blood sugar was 41. Now, for those who don't know, fasting blood sugar should be between 70 and 100. Most people, when they hear blood sugar, are worried about type 2 diabetes, where you have too high of a blood sugar. But Mendel had too low, called hypoglycemia. They didn't really know why, but it probably had something to do with him not eating. So they had to actually put in an IV of dextrose directly into his veins. And they had to give him fluids. 8 hours later, he was back home. He was walking again for the first time in 2 days, although weak. Wednesday morning, he looked really bad and out of it again. My wife took him back to the hospital, and I drove the other kids to school, and they admitted him. They said the rash was horrible downstairs, and they said, we're going to take him off food. He's not even eating anyway. He's throwing everything up. We're going to put him in IVs, and we're going to give his system a day or two to rest. They actually put special creams. They had actually put an oxygen mask down there with his diaper off, which seems kind of funny, but they just needed oxygen to heal. He was in a miserable mood, poor boy, and he's been through so much already in the previous 2 years. And he really was. Of all of our kids, he had more medical issues than all of our kids combined at that time. So I was telling my wife, it'd be nice Thursday. You've already been gone for 2 days. It's difficult. I'm with the house with the other kids. And to come with a babysitter help, but still. So unfortunately, we were used to this. He had just been in the hospital 2 months earlier with the respiratory issues, whereas oxygen was at 84%. For those that don't know, if you're under 90%, you have to go to the ICU. And this was the second time he was in an intensive care unit for respiratory issues. And this seemed to be not related to him passing out before. So he had it was a mess. So it was Friday morning. I was like, all right, let's get you home. And they said as long as he could drink 1 ounce or 1.5 ounces in 1 hour, 1.5 ounces, like that much, eat or drink anything, they would let him go. And this, by the way, is a hospital we love, Joe DiMaggio. It's a fantastic hospital. Mendel would not eat or drink anything. Nothing. And we tried all different techniques and whatever. It didn't matter what it was, juice, ice cream, food. He's a very picky eater. So, and he loves Rebbe videos. I said to my wife, show him the video, and he would like clap. He's like, hey, like clap. And so we're like, here, you want some food? Didn't want it. Didn't want the food. So it's getting to late morning. And my wife says, I think I might be here for Shabbos. And she just was with him with Shabbos 2 months ago. Now, for those that don't know, Shabbos is family time. It's difficult to be without, I have to get to synagogue and have little kids. And it's very difficult if I have to, do everything myself. So we had the babysitter stay. And suddenly 2 of my other kids were also sick. Now, thankfully, they are resolved on their own, but with Hashem's help, of course. But they didn't need to go to the hospital, Baruch Hashem. And my babysitter ended up staying home. And actually, one of them was still sick on Purim, and we had to have someone come to the house to read Megillah for him, our precious Dovi. If you see this, Dovi loves my videos more than everyone else. Hi, Dovi. I'm sure you're watching this. And my wife says, okay, if they get a bag for me. So trying to figure out what to do. And someone was going from where we live down to the same city where the hospital is. And they said, can you bring a bag for us? Sure, no problem. So I loaded up, asked my wife, what does she want? She wants some things for her, clothes, yada, yada, yada. And I'm packing things up and anything we think Mendel would like to eat because he's very picky. And on the table is a box of shmura matzah. Now, Mendel likes matzah. Most people don't like matzah. Mendel loves matzah. Not only that, Mendel's never touched challah, bread, in his life. He's almost 4 years old as of this recording. He's never touched, he will refuse, but he does it in such a nice, gentle way. You're like, Mendel, you want some challah? He's like, no. So Mendel, I know he likes matzah, but I'm thinking, well, his mouth is probably dry. He's not eating. But something just popped in my mind. I said, okay, take some matzah, break it up into a Ziploc bag and throw it in there. The person came, picked up the bag. They went down. The rabbi from Bikkur Cholim, from Healing Hearts, Rabbi Klein, also brought a bag of food for my wife and for Mendel. And this was like 5:30 Friday. So I was actually getting worried, which I never really worried. Despite everything else, I never worried. But this time I did worry because it didn't make any sense. Like, what's going on? I want to eat. Turn everything off for Shabbos. I had my phone on. Didn't hear anything. But what ended up happening was they tried to give him all different types of food, and he still refused. And the IV had failed for like 5 times, in his wrist. And he's very tiny, he has small veins. And they had taken out the IV earlier to try to get him to be hungry, but he wouldn't eat or drink. So they went to put the IV back in, and then it failed again, like the 6th time. So Pasha, poor Mendel. So as my wife is pulling things out to get ready for Shabbos, she's not even looking at, she's like turned where he is in the table. I wasn't there. She's telling me this. And she's just pulling stuff out to unpack it. And then she pulls out the matzah. And she hears from behind her a voice. Mendel says, Mata. And she turns around and Mendel goes, Mata. She goes, you want matzah? He goes, yeah. She gives him the matzah. He takes a piece and he starts to eat. And after he eats a little bit of matzah, he starts to drink. He drinks some apple juice. Then he eats some more matzah. Then he drinks he has some sort of formula, special formula because he's eating. Then he starts drinking his formula. Then he starts eating this and drinking that. But I didn't know. She didn't text me. I was worried. I was pushing worried. I never worry, but I was worried. It was definitely in my prayers, in my mind when I was davening. But this happened and he was totally fine Shabbos morning. But because it wasn't life-threatening, she was already there for a few days. They stayed in the hospital till Shabbos came out. Because for many of you, no, we can't drive on Shabbos unless it's life-threatening. So I went to go message. And I remember he came home. I went next door. They had exactly 10 guys for Megillah reading. By the time my wife came back, she caught the Megillah reading at shul and the last reading at 10 p.m. And I was so happy to see Mendel. He had such a smile. I gave him the biggest hug. I hadn't seen him in days. I was like, and every time I saw him, it was just so sad to see. Sorry. And so I gave him such a big hug. And I went to message the person to thank them for bringing the bag because it seems like a small thing. And then I wanted to quote the Hayyonim that talks about the power of matzah. But it was a little all over the place. So I found the source that the Hayyonim quotes how matzah is a food of healing. And it's always just like a nice, saying, matzah is a food of healing and yada, yada. I want to read to you what the Zohar says. The Zohar tells a parable of a king whose son was not well. After days of eating nothing, the prince finally mustered up a bit of an appetite. So for those that don't know, the Zohar says the son of a king is referring to the Jewish people that were children of God. So the prince is referring to a Jewish kid. The doctor said he must only eat this curative food, this food that heals, and don't let any other food be found in the house. They did so. And once he ate that healing food, that matzah, he was able to eat other foods without being harmed. I was floored. I think I had heard this before, but it was not on my mind at all. It definitely was not on my mind when I was thinking about what to get ready for Friday and everything else going on and getting the bag and coordinating. And it just popped in my mind. Or it was a feeling like, put some matzah in the bag for him. I don't know why. And it didn't make any sense. He wouldn't touch anything. And he called out for the matzah. My wife was not even looking at him. And he called out. And as soon as she gave him some of the matzah, he went back to normal. And I didn't put all the pieces together until after. And that was the last time Mendel was admitted in a hospital. He went briefly a few months later, Erev Shabbos. My wife thought we'd have to get him again. My son was sick home. I was running all around. I was going to try to coordinate and get down the I-95 and get over there and get to camp and pick up the kids. And she had a minivan. It was a mess. And I said to her, I remember I was about to go on the highway. And I literally looked up to Hashem and I said, I get it's a test. I get you want to see how we're going to react. Just please make it work out. I can't keep doing this. It's been by that time, 4 Shabboses within 4.5 months, where my wife was with 3 different kids in the hospital, twice with Mendel and once with 2 other kids of ours for pneumonia. I was like, Hashem, it's just too much, please. And I said to my wife, I called her, I'm on the highway. I said, just talk to the doctor. Just ask them if he could be released. And she said to me, they're not going to. They already started the process of being admitted. It's not going to happen. I'm used to this. I've been in the hospitals all the times with these kids. I'm used to it. I said, just ask. It was like 2 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock Erev Shabbos. I said, just ask. And she asked them and they said, well, can you eat? And they give him the bottle, whatever, the formula, and he starts eating. Okay, no problem. My wife was stunned. She was stunned. She said, I'd never seen this. They were literally delayed because the room wasn't clean yet. And they had to clean it. They should have already been in there. And then she got Mendel out. I got the nearest exit. I'll figure out a way to get back. I don't use GPS. I have a flip phone. I don't use GPS. I just north, south, east, west. They're just old school. And she got to camp. There's a 15-minute window to pick up your kids. She got to the hospital, got to the minivan, 2:31. Pickup was 2:30 to 2:45. She came home. Everyone was fine. And then one other time, Mendel was in the hospital recently, this past Sukkot, so a few months ago. He had a stridor. And she actually put it for ChatGPT. And it diagnosed it even better than the doctors. And 3:15 in the morning, Sukkot morning, where we can't drive, but it's life-threatening, drove down there, treated him. She was back by 7 a.m. And I was off at Shul. So now that I finished the story, you might ask, why did I share this? What does it have to do with my channel? Because there's a hierarchy to miracles. There's biblical, which is very distant biblical stories. It's a story in a book. Maybe they didn't happen, maybe it didn't happen, from a skeptic's point of view. Then there's historical ones, inspiring, but it's easy to doubt. And then you have personal. So whether something happens to a neighbor or happens to you, when it happens to you, it happens to you. And this is part of that conviction, realizing that there is something beyond the physical world. And even though there's rules in place, sometimes God breaks those rules or manipulates them. He shows himself to us. We have a lesson to learn from each miracle story, especially when it happens to us. And so when you experience the agency overriding the mechanism in your own life, it's not blind faith. It's an observation. It's data. So if you want the unshakable conviction, we need to stop writing off our own life experiences as coincidences. They're hashgacha pratis. They're Hashem showing himself to us. So I want to know, have you ever had that moment where things didn't add up, your own miracle story, and you knew it was something beyond this world? I want to hear your story in the comments. I read every single one. To learn more about my story on how I became religious, click here. And to see how I answer uncomfortable challenges of religion, click here. If you'd like to sponsor one of these classes, click on the link in the description. Thank you for partnering with me as we build this unshakable conviction together.